Silence is more than the absence of sound. It is a mindset, a discipline, and a conscious practice that Stoics appreciated was fundamental to achieving self-mastery. In our noisy world, silence is a rare skill. Ancient Stoics sought moments of silence not to withdraw from life, but to sharpen their mind and direct their will. They understood that silence provides space to train our inner voice, which clarifies thought and cultivates the ability to act with intention. The rush of automated communication distracts us with endless messages, opinions, and reactions, leaving us in a condition of mental splintering. Silence allows the mind to regroup. Silence becomes a container for our thoughts that settle and reveal clarity. Stoics taught us that if we cannot listen to ourselves, we cannot command ourselves. Silence is not the same as passivity. Silence is the active choice to create space where reason can proposition without agitation. Silence does not require us to disengage from society. The Stoic moves among men and is active in the duties of his city, yet he always maintains his own silences. It is at this moment when awareness arises. Clarity of the difference between acting on impulse and executing concrete action. The Stoic who invites silence into his life is in a position to intentionally respond, rather than mindlessly react. We will explore the Stoic conception of silence as a discipline, its role in character building, and its application in daily life. We take this journey to understand silence as a catalyst for internal fortitude, future decision-making, and taking control of my own mind. Let us get started. Chapter 1. Silence as a teacher. The Stoic viewed silence as an active teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote that even when surrounded by a frenzy of action, a person has the ability to escape into themselves, to examine their own thought. If we have entered silence, we may now hear the noise of other people from afar away. They have drifted away from us. In silence, we may now hear their reasoning, even thought it is trumped by our own. This is our place to meet our authentic reasoning that is clear from reaction, clear from performance. When in conversation, silence can let listening deepen and blossom in ways that few other practices can. It slows down a rapid judgment or speaking process based on ego, vanity, habit, or filling every gap in the conversation with noise. Delaying your response allows your mind the opportunity to digest the entire communicated message and think through tone, context, and intention with deliberation. You recognize not only the choice of words, but also the feeling behind them, the pauses that indicate hesitation or emphasis, and the patterns between them which reflect subliminal motivations. This form of listening enhances patience and clarity and allows you to retaliate thoughtfully instead of hastily. The Stoics noted that this was indicative of wisdom because it enhances both judgment and control, which ultimately endowed the words you select added weight. Silence teaches much of the control on the deepest level, since it teaches how to control based on restraint. The impulse to say something, especially when defending pride, proving knowledge, or establish control, can be overwhelming and relentless. When you disagree with someone or seek substantial clarification, the impulse to say something is a significant force. Resisting this impulse is an exercise in willpower that conditions the mind to control itself during a pressure-filled situation. Each time you choose silence instead of unnecessary implementation of language, you form a habit to act in measured approach, conserve mental bandwidth, and prevent you from committing to something in words that cannot be taken back. Epictetus said, "Speak only if your words improve the silence." That's a high bar for self-awareness, humility, and discipline. Speaking only when your words improve the silence would require continual awareness of your thoughts. It encourages you to be humble, by not committing to words or actions that are any fraction of grander ability. It will take discipline for you to continually evaluate your speech. Over time, sticking to this standard will refine your judgment, presence, and reveal a quiet confidence that does not need to frequent speak for it to be known. In daily life, silence can build in layers on top of your daily routine. Silence can be a stabilizing force. Try it. Begin your day free of outside disturbance until your own thoughts are raised from sleep before the noise of the world competes for your attention. Don't fill every pause with speech, conversation, actions, devices, or media. Let a few pauses remain open so that your mind can navigate and process what was just presented to it from lived experience or new thoughts. Seek silence during walking, travel, or other moving situations where silence and grounding can be embraced. Be willing to re-enter yourself. Intentionally put 1/2 of a second pause before you speak in meetings or personal exchanges. When you commit to recurrence, silence will no longer be emptiness or absence. It will be restoration, strength, and clarity. These habits will give you the ground you need to approach every demand of your day with purpose from a conscious mind and be able to find your inner stillness in the present moment when the noise of the world is directly in front of you. Silence is not just an act of self-control. It is an ongoing self-training that alters the configuration of how the mind and emotions work in tandem. With every moment you hold back on speech, you generate a stockpile of poise and establish your ability to remain stable and calm while the world churns in uncertainty. That impulse to speak is often tied up with a need for affirmation in the moment, or discomfort with not verbalizing thoughts. By using silence, you create the opportunity to tolerate these impulsive calls to engage in speech without caving into them, proving to yourself that you do not need affirmation at every turn. Eventually, this self-restraint develops into a form of frontal armor you don on a confrontational condition to endure confrontation, ambiguity, and disagreement with calm determination. To develop this condition, you can enlist the use of noticing triggers and examining your unnecessary forms of speech, usually from previous proclivities, to develop a habit of withholding speech altogether. You can notice whether certain people, circumstances, or topics pull words out of you without passing thought. Distinguishing these occasions sparks your ability to be able to interrupt those moments with intention and silence. This is not silence as lack of, but rather silence as possession. The kind of silence where you are completely engaged, listening and observing, without a need to react and respond as you become oversaturated in thought. As repetition continues, contact of the max model of thought to speech expands, and in that expansion, reason can grow. In the space of daily life, silence can be perceived through layers. Early morning silence can provide the time to collect your thoughts and organize them before the noise of the day takes over. A midday, if even short, pause can create a moment for resetting the mind as new challenges present themselves. Evenings spent in silent contemplation can help reinforce the articulation of the day, ensuring that each day is concluded before moving toward the next. These processes have a compounding effect, producing a rhythm of activities where you can refresh your mental state. You can extend silence as a practice through your movements, walking without headphones, traveling without a continuous conversation, or even stopping between locations can become times for restoration. In professional settings, silence before speaking in a meeting offers weight to your intended message, and allows others to feel your intensity. In personal relationships, to listen in silence allows others the opportunity to feel heard without losing their point to your story. In time and with practice, silence can be a readiness, not just a habit. Here, silence is a concept you take into every experience. You know you can act or speak when you want to, but you are not required to take up space for the sake of it. This is how silence moves from momentary pause to lifelong grounding and strength. Chapter 2. The authority of observation without response. To observe without response is a discipline that polishes judgment. When you are quiet, you notice things you may not notice if you were busy talking. The Stoics considered perception as the first stage in acting rightly. By minimizing your desire to act out hosted thoughts, you maximize your ability to see what is actually there. That is true for people and for situations. You may find you can distinguish behavior patterns, emotional shifts, and environmental changes in silence that may be missed otherwise. All this makes for better decisions. All this also protects you against reacting prematurely in ignorance. In dispute, silence acts as an extinguisher to fire. When faced with confrontational anger or critique, the immediate thought of running to voice may throw gasoline on the embers of conflict. A silence helps the emotion to cool off and also displays restraint, which could lessen tension. This is not avoidance, but clarity in the face of urgency or pressure. The Stoics encouraged speech alignment with necessity. There are countless instances in which the need for you is nothing more than your presence and your awareness. At the core is watching without talking. This not only lessens the force of emotion, but increases the force of reason. The practical outcome is to be intentional about pausing in conversations. Breathe before you speak. Your words might have value. Developing this habit of pause helps enhance both listening and discerning, which gives you an advantage over others in every interaction. This can apply to all human interactions, but also noticing what is happening in your surroundings. When you are silent, you can notice infinitesimal signals, changes in stance, shifts in tone, and fluctuations in energy that can give you insight into someone's intent and state of mind. You can also observe sequenced behavior over time to determine what is constant or variable that can give you insight and understanding of patterns. The same can be said for your surroundings. An atmosphere that is different than normal, a break in a routine, or unusual pace make meaning that is invisible to the person who is preoccupied with talking or distractions, or both. These more nuanced observations can help you choose your next step with more clarity, while protecting you from action based on assumptions or partial truths. In disputes, silence can be both a shield and a signaling. The human tendency to respond when challenged, which will most likely escalate a dispute and cause you to say something foolish or irrevocable, will assert itself and oftentimes in the moment will escalate the verbal exchange. Allowing a pause between your emotional response and your response to the original communication will reduce emotional response and allow you to think your way through the action at hand. Silence signals to the other disputant that you are capable of self-regulation. You will not be baited. Often, quiet will result in some lowering of volume or the other disputant changed response altogether. Certainly, this leaves some possibility of resolution. The Stoics believed the appropriate response to noise was to simply let speech represent function and not to respond at all unless your words have a meaningful contribution to the moment. Non-verbal observation is active. Passive is the perception of the ego and requires no action. If you observe, your thinking brain will stay engaged, and the emotional bias will be removed from your decision-making processes. This will help you seeing the true nature of a situation more clearly in determining any course of action. To create this approach as a practice, begin inserting a pause into your subsequent verbal communications regardless of the scenario. Use this time for pause to determine the value of your scrape of communication and whether your silence might do a better service, or, if suitable. With regular intentional silence over time, you begin to sharpen your judgment, refine your listening, and cultivate an unspoken presence, commanding respect without constant speech. Chapter 3. Silence and Self-Mastery. Self-mastery begins with mastery of the outward expression of impulses of speech. Once expressed, words cannot be taken back. The Stoics recognized that when outward expression of speech is careless, action often follows suit. In silence, you create the deliberate space of time that allows you to understand your motives prior to beginning to act. Seneca admonished against wasting time on petty talk, reminding us that wayfaring idle talk is an ego thief of our mental and physical energy, keeping us mentally, physically, and emotionally fatigued. He was consciously aware that we can represent ego using words just as egotistical states can arise from ego, vanity, resentment, gossip, and unexamined opinion. These states are distracting to the mind and pull our intentions away from higher value outcomes and enduring pursuits. Your deliberate silences do the best job conserving all mental and physical energy you will eventually devote elsewhere towards meaningful action, and also keep you free from unnecessary and superfluous obligations, disputes, and impressions that leave no important or lasting memory. With this energy, you can create more discretionary energy and spend it adapting to do the work, assume all the responsibilities, and cultivate the people that you want to engage with your principles, purging both purposefulness and effective. Silence strengthens the relationship between thought and action by reducing the steady leak of attention through meaningless conversation. Speaking less enables you to establish a habit of intentional movement where every step and every decision is prefaced with thought. When you begin to see the precision in speech and action, you will give your actions the full weight of your intention, free from the delusion of aimless words. Over time, this conscious restraint will create a reputation for dependability, focus, and composure. These were the qualities the Stoics saw as indispensable for personal authority, leadership, and moral influence. Practicing this discipline begins with setting boundaries for yourself on when, where, and how you speak with intention. That being said, make a conscious decision to abstain from tending to pointless conversations or those that serve minimal, tangible benefit. Pay particular attention to times when you feel the compulsive need to give an opinion or speak info habit. In those moments, turn that urge on its head and actively listen. Allow other people plenty of room to talk without interruption and wait for them to finish their thought fully before you respond. Practice even when you have something to say or contribute. To hold your silence for a few extra seconds or even as long as you can. Use this extra time to refine your words to see if the words are necessary at all. With continued practice, this restraint will hone your communication, shape your character, and provide much more power and presence to the authenticity of your attention and quality of your contributions. When you speak less, you have more time to think, analyze, and methodically reflect on the suitability of your intentions before you act on them. Each choice to restrain gives strength to the connection between your internal reasoning and your external behavior. This connection fosters a way of life based on intention and purpose, where your words and actions align with your values and philosophical principles. It also protects the mind from fracturing attention by engaging in continuous low-value talk. It preserves vital energy and attention on matters that matter most. Practicing this restraint can be assisted by an intentioned framework. Set exact boundaries on when, where, and with who you participate in conversations. Chunking creates self-control and limits the chance of being pulled into conversations that serve no constructive purpose. A strong and helpful habit is to designate specific times of the day for verbal interaction, while reserving times for quiet work or focused thought. Before too long, silence becomes a natural and comfortable state of being, even in social situations where noise is the normal tendency. You are also training your awareness to recognize opportunities for impulsive speech before it happens, so both the habit of a quiet mind and a quiet authority develops. You become aware of the bodily signals, racing thoughts, and eagerness to interrupt, or tension in the body that accompanies impulsive speech. Each of these signals provides an opportunity to listen to your mind and body, take a breath, and make a choice to remain silent or speak more accurately. Instinct is replaced by thought, creating a buffer between impulse and expression. As you continue to practice, your projecting of measured speech will mimic a quiet authority. When others see you pausing to consider before you choose to speak, your words carry much more weight in the eyes of others. If you have words of substance, you may gain somewhat of their trust if used in a wise and relevant manner. We are subjected to the belief about our words. If you are perceived as a person who thinks in silence and speaks slowly, you will be better able to inspire others with influence and guidance, instead of all the details of instruction or distractions. For you, silence will equally transcend past being a choice to exercise discipline, but become a precept for acting rightly, often. It aligns intention with action, enhances the mind, to diminishes the compulsive distractions, and evolves presence that earns respect through continuity of action and purpose. Chapter 4. Silence when provoked. The Stoic understanding of provocation being a truth of stability if we do not cultivate anger. Provocation craves an audience. Silence denies that request. When we are not moved by the provocation, we are fundamentally a master of self in that moment and shape of situation. In the relative provocation, to provoke the personal is automatic. Blizzard of thinking clouds decision-making process feasibility, and a decision prevents responses being forced, then actioned in default state of anger, reasoning, and retaliation. In the climax of response, where there is such an internal discomfort, to compel a response to pause, to consider, judgment of silence cannot overcome. And of course, speaking becomes so much more easier to generate provocation. Choosing not to respond in these moments brings about a protective barrier. It breaks the automatic chain of stimulus to reaction and allows the initial rush of emotion to dissipate and rational thought to return. The pause in response changes the rhythm of the interaction, forcing both you and the other individual to confront the lack of a verbal rebuttal. Sometimes, this absence of immediate response jostles the negative rhythms created in the episode of hostility, and tempers become diffused, and an opportunity to bring resolution might be created. Marcus Aurelius stated that offense should be met with dignity, and that dignity cannot be lost by refusing to join the verbal pits and banter of diminutive people. In these dynamics, an affirmative silence is not a void to hide in, but is a positive action strategy. A positive silence redirects your attention to that which you control, your thoughts your breathing, your posturing, and your constancy of astonished face. This positive silence centers you, giving you the ability to sustain your self-presentation without the effects of emotional disturbance pulling you down. Building this capacity takes time, repetition, and training. Begin by practicing with low-stakes irritations and disagreements, so the stakes are low. Use these instances to resist your first reaction and see what is occurring for you in that pause. There is usually a prompt to respond, regardless of whether it is irritation or anger. Register the urge and decide to wait to respond. Practicing this will allow you to become more comfortable allowing silence to exist and will help you to become familiar with it in more high-stakes situations. Over time, this practice of self-restraint will allow you to respond with more accuracy, clarity, and control, and utilize the interactions that may have resulted in conflict to model self-mastery and quiet strength when provoked. As I have mentioned previously, when provoked, the body-mind will go into a state where heart rate increases, breathing becomes labored, and thoughts are racing. In approximately 5 to 15 seconds, when you do not intercept the impulse to defend, justify, or retaliate, the body may assume so strongly that you cannot resist the impulse to react, and deliberate thought will only come afterward. The words that we produce in those moments can inflict enormous and disproportionate impacts that will last, and effects on relationships, reputation, and possibilities. Additionally, if the other responds without pause, the symptom-response cycle develops a momentum that can be nearly impossible to halt. Choosing to remain silent in this situation is a deliberate act of restraint and self-protection. It stops the chain of stimulus and response and creates a momentary pause in which the emotional charge of the original experience dissipates and the rational mind reasserts itself. The conscious effort to remain silent also changes the tempo of the encounter, puts a break in the escalating hostility, and forces both parties to adjust to one another without the aid of verbal resistance. In many instances, this amount of time is sufficient to cool tempers and rediscover a defining future pathway. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that maintaining dignity in the face of provocation unenslaves the provoker and liberates the provokee. In this context, dignity means undertaking a restraint to deny engagement with an exchange that has no higher purpose. In these moments, silence is not merely a pause. It is a tactical decision to detach attention from the external source of agitation and inwardly focus one's control over thoughts, body language, breathing, and steady expression. By taking back your focus, you offer the front line of your thinking to counter the pull of the agitation offered by the other person. This practice gives you a way to stay present so that you are less likely to say something that will either compromise your position or further disturb your calm. The capacity to remain silent when provoked does not happen overnight. It's a practice and a habit that develops over time as you work on smaller occasions when you experience the possibility of being provoked. Start with something incidental. A passenger's mild irritation or provocation in response to traffic that stopped you, or a delay that may be maddening to others with you. Or you may want to try a native provocation, perhaps just the people who annoy you a little with unintended casual comments. And use these occasions to practice a bit of pausing before you respond. Notice your reactions to the incident. Does your chest tighten? Does your mind race with responses? Do you have the impulse to interrupt? Notice your feelings and then practice letting them go by with an immediate response. All you have to do is extend your practice into more impactful encounters as you grow your commendable composure in the small things. And whenever you find yourself able to keep silent in a situation in which you would have normally responded, you exercise a tolerance for pain-inducing and habit-forming pressure. You are growing as a person. By practicing that habit through incremental practice, you can build a skill that you will be able to count on in any situation. More importantly, you will be able to respond optimally. You will instinctively use language that will move you forward over time, and you will learn to conduct yourself knowingly as someone worth listening to and not in a narcissistic way. By converting prospective conflict into a display of calmness, you showcase quiet strength, earn respect from those around you, and reinforce your own self-control over difficult human interactions. Section 5. Establishing daily rituals of silence. Rituals help to solidify the practice of silence, transferring it from an occasionally performed activity into a reliable part of the daily routine. The Stoics often began and ended their day with intentional periods of reflection. This protected time is for reviewing previous actions, considering prior decisions, and preparing the mind for upcoming decisions. Each of these sessions is a period of training oneself, confirming your clarity and self-command. Morning silence is a layer of civil awakening, providing the foundation of how the day will begin. A period of intentional silence engages the individual before speaking or working with others. Turn to your own private thoughts for a period of time alone. Take this moment to identify your priorities. Consider upcoming obstacles. Remind yourself of your principles. It might even just be a moment to get your mind in order before any of the outside demands take hold of your attention. Evening silence provides a non-demanding ritual to close the day. It provides a context to think about what went well, what needed to improve, and then release yourself from what needs to happen before sleep comes. There are opportunities for smaller initiatives of silence in between these points of reference. A walk without conversation enables thoughts to settle and attention to sharpen. A pause before the meeting can quiet and steady the mind to prepare the mind to be present. Brief pauses from information and conversation and between tasks are useful in helping restore focus and recognizing mental fatigue. Even a small amount of quiet can, over time, reset the rhythm of your thinking. These practices also create reliable points of reference in your routine. They can help you get back to your center, wherever and whenever the pace and unpredictability of your environment creates noise or chaos. Silence in this conception represents not an absence to retreat into, but a presence you are embodying. It is a durable sense of strength, stability, and confidence in clarity in all situations. Rituals are the scaffold that adopts silence into a busy lifestyle. Without rituals, quiet moments are a roll of the dice. You either catch the right turn in the outer world, or you accept defeat as urgent demands, and small distractions impose on your attention. Rituals shape them into purposeful practices and offer you dependable time in which to quiet your mind and restore your focus. The Stoics considered these periods as serious appointments with oneself to reflect on an honest examination of oneself and to reinforce the principles of their actions. Morning silence would not just be a break, but would be the moment to reflect on when the first further task on their list would be. Before joining the world, you could also think about your intentions, what barriers might challenge you, and mentally practice your pathways through those. It readies your mind to act in accordance with your intentions rather than acting out of habit. In contrast, evening silence is a kind of purposefully protected cool-down period, to self-reflect honestly, to capture what changes you want, and then release unneeded mental energy before sleep. In between those two larger pillars, smaller moments of silence throughout the day help you sustain your vision and clarify your intentions. This could be a few moments of stillness after you have completed a form of taxing work, like purposeful stillness at the end of a conversation, a quiet walk to refresh your energy prior to entering another meeting, or a brief stillness if a very important conversation is rapidly approaching. It could also not only be silence, but removing forms of noise from your daily life, particularly forms of unneeded or distracting background noise, limiting digital distractions, and establishing mental boundaries regarding the times you choose to be provided requests to speak. Once these rituals take root, they create a steady rhythm in your life. It is a sort of stable or grounding presence that stays constant through a time of fast-moving events happening outside of you. Silence becomes skillfully embedded in your daily living and begins to emerge as something that you can tap into anytime you need. A source of inner steadiness, strength, and direction that remains constant, independent of circumstance. Chapter 6. Silence as a form of strength. Silence, when approached deliberately, takes on the quality of inner strength that will sustain your steadiness, self-control, and resilience. It is the ability to remain steady when everyone else is consumed by emotion and impulse. The Stoics identified this as foundational to living in accordance with reason. The Stoics saw silence as a deliberate action of keeping one's position and holding circumstance at bay, while the noise and agitation of the moment influenced you. Steadiness is reinforced through repeated and continual practice and becomes a safe anchoring resource in uncertain times. Silence enables you the space to observe and gather a fuller picture before engaging in moments of uncertainty. It lets you investigate the particulars, discern fact from assumption, and contemplate the consequences of various possible reactions. The pause serves as a buffer against the temptation to speak earlier than you should, or act before you fully understand the issues. People who can fully practice this exposure of silence will find themselves rarely confronted by the urgencies of the moment, issue of provocation, or the emotional volatility of the communicator they are conversing with. They are, therefore, the actor and not the acted upon, giver, not hitchhiker. Silence is also an eloquent form of humility that speaks volumes. We are naturally drawn to the person who conveys complete listening, then carefully responds. This included approach illustrates certainty, patience, and ultimately, authority on the subject matter. As leaders, silence becomes a tool of influence, demonstrating you prefer to listen, fully explore the facts as opposed to the emotions, and make choices from a place of equilibrium, not urgency. To reinforce silence as a brand of strength, regularly practice leaving space in your conversations and treat silences as intentional tools, rather accidental spaces between different moments. Make sure not to fill every break with words that add little, and let silence breathe and have its purpose. Use these reflections to take a breath, think, and notice what others are saying and doing, too. Changes in tone of voice, smiles and frowns, or subtle and not so subtle movements can yield as much information as their verbal communication. The way the discussion is flowing may change when you quiet and let others carry on, and you simply observe other viewpoints. While you practice this present and attentive state of mind, you begin to get a more complete understanding of the situation. Eventually, you will know how to really notice what is going on. Your attention will justify those pauses and deepen your perception to accurately read situations and strengthen your ability to respond to the situation. You'll find it starting to train your awareness, and whilst you hone your observations, People may notice that when you say something, it carries weight. Your presence can start to have influence even before you speak. In cases of uncertainty, silence delivers a controlled environment in which you can observe without distraction and distortion. In that quiet period, you were able to witness what was taking place. You would notice details that were small and missed before. You have developed a map in your mind of what was occurring before you decided to act. You can contrast information and note inconsistencies, and so on. And distinguishing corroborated facts as opposed to assumptions or incomplete impressions. While this is not only about responding only when you know, it's about making sure you answer with the best and most correct understanding. The habit of pausing before speaking means that your experience with others will become more naturally resistant to outside resistance, as it is easier to pause and not be pulled by the urgency or emotion of others the situation. Maintaining this steady posture of awareness and control in your interactions with others will be an asset to you in decision negotiations and any high-stakes interactions where timing and clarity of your thought processes are present. Silence also communicates a presence that others recognize instinctively as confidence and authority. It indicates you are comfortable with patience and won't be rushed. You are not accusing quickly, and you are not too concerned about the energy of the room as a pressure point to bring value to your response. People are often more willing to be vulnerable when they feel you are listening, particularly when you allow them to complete their train of thought before you share yours. In terms of listening, this builds credibility, and then your words hold so much more weight because it reflects your intention to be thoughtful in considering a reply, even when it was an impulsive thought. Even more so in a leadership context. With silence, you have control over the timing of decisions. You dictate the pace of the discussion. You direct the flow of discussion without overtaking it. To develop the practice of silence strategically, you will need to approach it as a habitual, mindful practice. Identify what type of pause you are willing to engage in for practice. Establish the intention of advancing conversations by letting them breathe, even though your instincts may suggest otherwise. When you sense silence, pay attention to your breathing as a way to anchor your attention and let thought settle. While listening, scan for non-verbal indicators, body posture, hand motions, shifts in eye contact or tone that may indicate hesitation or commitment. Those non-verbal indicators often indicate additional layers of meaning beyond the child's play of the spoken word. Likewise, in group conversation, silence opens a pathway for others to elaborate or reevaluate a position. And often, these are more sincere or revealing exchanges. Over time, these silent observations sharpen your discernment with respect to individual reasons for wanting things to be a particular way, which deepens your strategic thinking. This practice could ultimately create an impression from your presence in any circumstance, even before you utter a single word. Chapter 7. Silence and Decision-Making. Good decisions are contingent upon clarity, and clarity requires room to think. Silence carves that space. The Stoics believed that important decisions ought to be made with a mind uncluttered by distraction and urgency. In silence, you are less influenced by the motivations and emotions of others, and better able to hear your own reasoning. Prior to making a decision, step back from the discussion and deliberately create a time for silence. Use the break time to gather all relevant facts. Confirm these facts from reputable sources and consider each fact in light of the entire situation. Break the information into knowns presumed and needed verification. Consider the reliability of the sources and ask for clarification when details are ambiguous. Consider all possibilities, immediate, near-term, and long-term. Weigh out all possible paths from each, leaning carefully against your principles, eternal priorities, and ethical principles. Imagine the potential adverse effects of each of these routes and the good things, bad things, and downstream effects of any potential decisions. Think about which choices resonate with your personal and professional plans, and think about the unintended consequences of each choice. Consider how each move could affect relationships, trust, reputation, resources, and future opportunities. That space and time to pause shapes our chances of making moves based on imperfect information, enhances the connection between decisions and our guiding standards, and helps ensure our actions, as much as possible, are anchored in rational evidence, vision, strategy, and context. Silence in group settings can also create an advantageous strategic maneuver. When you demonstrate listening fully and without a rush to share your point of view, you are able to capture these nuances about the perspective, motivations, and priorities of others in a more accurate way. You are also preserving your options and waiting to see where new pieces of information may lead you. People will often share more data or insight or anxieties when they do not feel rushed or interrupted. The value in being open creates the potential for understandings, increased collaboration, and effective outcome. Taking a moment to consider your words will also allow you to read the temperature of the group emotionally, discerning unspoken tensions, and will help frame your comments for the greatest constructive outcome. Perceiving these types of dynamics allows you to choose the precise moments that you will contribute in order to ensure your comments weigh the most heavily and promote progress versus resistance. If you are going to make silence an efficient and predictable part of your decision-making, it is best to form a consistent habit of reflection before taking action. Pausing, regardless of whether it is momentary or prolonged, will allow you to consider the circumstance from different perspectives, as well as timing and any challenges that may arise. Consider best case, worst case, and likely case thinking, and weigh these against your resources, strategic priorities, and long-term goals. Each decision will have a series of action steps that are required, as well as who would need to have the skills necessary and who would need to be allies or a support network to be successful. They should formulate possible scenarios and think through obstacles ahead of time before moving forward. With diligent and conscious practice of silence, you will sharpen your judgment, deepen your self-trust, and be able to operate from a place of clarity, equilibrium, and intentions, even in high-pressure and rapidly changing environments. Chapter 8. The Discipline of Withholding Judgment. Silence is related to the discipline of judging. An essential skill that the Stoics understood was pivotal to wise living and decision-making. The Stoics know that first impressions are often completely incomplete, misconstrued, or influenced from a limited and sometimes misleading context, and thus are powerful, but not conclusive. If you can consciously hold your tongue and avoid making instant comments or conclusions, you make space for the emergence of more facts, more opinions, and more of your own gradual understanding to be formed before reaching a definitive conclusion. This conscious withholding process allows room for more layers of truths to emerge, giving you a stronger basis for whatever response you might choose to make. The process of withholding judgment is consciously sustained and sustained mental discipline. It is more than simply delaying an opinion. It is the conscious suppression of the natural tendency to label, categorize or evaluate situations and people before you have a full understanding. This discipline sacrifices immediacy out of a commitment to the rational process. It requires us to manipulate the flow of information, to seek to understand it over time, recognizing both the broad and minute discretions that compose the larger narrative. Understanding does not often come in a cohesive package. It comes as distinct, often errant, pieces that are easily missed when the mind is impatient to conclude. This discipline also requires humility, acknowledging that our current understanding is likely very partial, and ensuring that we build a platform of patience that allows events to unfold until we have an accurate understanding of them. Silence promotes both traits, reminding us to stay focused and open to new information without supplanting our first and incomplete impressions. In conversation, this discipline saves you when you say things that you cannot take back, that undermine your credibility and/or lead to unnecessary complications later. It diminishes your chances of committing to any opinion too quickly. This leaves the door open when things change or new evidence comes about. It likewise reduces escalation in conversations when there are strong feelings or competing agendas. My observation has been that when you deliberately withhold judgment, this expands your conscious ability to go beyond mere surface appearances. Over time, you will begin to notice patterns in people's behaviors, consistencies and inconsistencies in their actions, and subtle references in their tone, body language, and timing which provide different aspects of their intent. The finer level of perception often provides you with insights which no one is aware of when they rushed to judgment. To continue to work on this practice and be purposeful, try to make duration of pauses in conversation as a regular and intentional part of your engagement. Specifically, train yourself to slow your pace to allow for new information to be discovered before you adopt a conclusion. While you listen, aim to notice gaps, inconsistencies, or vague statements that need clarification, and then ask specific, focused questions to help surface these points. Watch for both surface details as well as implicit details, particularly things that might be left unsaid, perhaps because they are just as important as what gets said. Keep your attention on the person you are talking with and do not shift focus to how you will respond. This maximizes your ability to truly hear the nuances of the exchange and so will not miss important clues. In the instances when there is an absence of contradictory information, there are also incomplete facts, or it will be sensitive. Regard silence as an investigative tool. Once you establish clear assertions, validate them independently with reliable and independent sources for their validity. Diversify your opinions to filter out bias and biases and blind sides of the information you've been given. Then take previous findings forward over time to see if patterns are consistent or indeterminate. Understand that things change, and when they do, you may peel back veils of interests or motives. Engage this practice as an intentional mechanism across personal relationships, professional collaborations, and involved decision-making so that it becomes a habitual and non-cognitive practice. As this practice solidifies on an ethical development level, you will naturally become more accurate in assessments and recognize you have increased degrees of sense-making flexibility when assessing situations outside your embodied experience. You will begin to see dimensions to meanings in tone, subtle differences in body language, or situated contexts that invariably remain blind to less sophisticated sense-making thinkers. Your observations will go further than first impressions, allowing you to spot patterns, intentions, and possible outcomes with greater accuracy. Your choices will be based on a bigger, more trustworthy piece of evidence window talking with twice, who was reflected on and compared, will lead to outcomes behavior that show integrity and sound reason. In time, people will notice the consistency, depth, and accuracy of your reasoning, regarding you as a reliable source of information and impartial judgment. They will ask your opinion about their routine or momentous decisions, trusting they are founded on persisting analysis and correctness. Your words will carry weight, in that they become known for being valued, relevant, and effective through planning, systematic assessment, and a clear attachment to verity. Your influence will thereby establish respected and lasting influence over situations to being and continue to direct toward positive intention. Chapter 9. Silence in resolving conflict. Conflict often escalates because people feel they have to respond by means of constant discourse. The Stoics were aware that silence can be an effective way to temper difficulty and create space where resolution can emerge. You provide the opportunity for emotions to settle and rationality to re-enter without responding verbally to every challenge. In a challenging or unpleasant environment, silence can provide a purposeful response that communicates being alert, patient in one's own time frame, and in control over their choices. Utilizing silence in this measured way sends a message to the other person that you are fully present to their perspective, and that others should be given the privilege of being heard without their interruptions. This effect of silence lowers defense mechanisms and creates an opportunity for perceived safety in the exchange, which can result in opening greater possibilities for conversation and advancing toward shared dialogues. It can also slow down a furious discussion so that all parties can think clearly. Allowing a pause in one's active response when determining an appropriate response at the time protects someone from impulsive comments that they will later regret. But it also prevents the conversation from heading into arguments about positions that obstruct solutions to issues. Pausing allows emotions, including yours and theirs, to sufficiently cool for rationality, empathy, and collaboration to suspend their existence in the interaction. To use silence as a server in conflicts, you already have a tendency to listen with full attention before responding. In this vein, listen meaningfully. Give your complete attentional presence to both aspects of what is being exchanged, the spoken and the unspoken aspects. Be attentive to not only the actual words they are using, and also pay careful attention to tone, pacing, and underlying emotional currents, which may reveal deeper feelings or intention. But also notice the other person's facial expressions, posture, gestures, and movements. These non-verbal behaviors generally provide way more context to dialogue than the words being spoken, and therefore it is important to note hesitations in speech, inflection, and if the person's body language seems disconnected from what is being said. The body often signals much more clearly issues that might require acknowledgement. Avoid the natural tendency to formulate your reply while your conversational partner is talking, as this will divide your headspace and diminish your ability to capture the exchange in its totality. You simply want to be aware of everything being communicated in the moment. So you will be listening to the actual words being said, tone, the pace and hesitations or emphases. You will also be observing facial expressions, posture, and gestures, as these signals will often show attitudes, emotional conditions, or priorities that are not blatantly obvious. This attention will ensure that you are engaged in way beyond just the content of the messages, but that you tune in to the emotional and relational context in which is being delivered to you. Your ability to keep your mind clear of preconceived responses will also help you to avail the value of each piece of communicated content. point to be comprehended entirely prior to deciding on how to deal with it. Letting the other person finish without interruption means that you have respect for their view, which often leads someone to be willing to share more freely without their guard up. This uninterrupted sharing can bring out some critical details and clarify the underlying reasons that can often be clouded. When it is your turn to speak, choose words that get directly and constructively to the point, with language that is specific, germane, and intentional. And continue to focus on the key matters. Avoid side issues, side arguments, or emotional rants that dilute the purpose of the discussion or shifts the focus away from those real issues that need resolving. You want to speak calmly and with a steady tone that conveys control and respect, and where reason, cooperation, and collaborative problem-solving can begin to grow. Your physical presence should reflect this as well. Your calm, steady action, measured gestures, body upright and attentive, and steady, deliberate eye contact will all convey steadiness, seriousness, and dependability. You can also paraphrase the main points you have understood from their comments before sharing your view, to confirm accuracy of mutual understanding and limit the opportunities for misunderstandings or misalignment. In this way, you help build a solid framework for both participants to work from a well-defined and mutually accepted base of facts and intentions. You can increase this process's effectiveness by adding to it. Take the time to ensure that your delivery style is what you want to present. Try not to rush your words and allow small pauses between points so that they can settle with the listener. Be careful with your word choice, as you do not want to confuse your statement by adding needless complexity. You want your message to be clear enough to be enacted under duress. When delivering your opinion, deliver it in a logical order that advances from the issue statement to supporting points and ends with a clear proposed action or decision. This style supports the listener's ability to follow your reasoning and response constructively. You might even add a measured acknowledgement where you briefly validate that the other party's concerns or perspectives are important. Show that you heard them even if you do not agree with every molecule. This engenders openness and mitigates defensiveness. If you insist on following these principles consistently, by disciplined silence and limited speech, conflict moves towards a more solutions-oriented process. Getting to this state replaces reactive back and forth with mindful thoughtfulness and establishes a rhythm of speaking and listening that promote each other rather than compete with each other. And this equilibrium promotes deeper and better quality conversations we get to robustly considered options and outcomes with minimal unnecessary conflict or hostility. Eventually, you will establish a reputation for remaining calm during disagreements and appear to others as fair, mature, and as a leader. Others will appreciate that your contributions are a result of careful thought, broad perspectives, and sincere intentions which build their trust in your judgment. This credibility makes it easier to reach agreements, develop solutions that benefit both parties, and allows you to continue positive relationships even after difficult disagreements. Mastering and developing this approach makes you a person who can direct even the most challenging interactions toward resolution with clarity, steadiness, and even permanence. Chapter 10. Making silence a practice of a lifetime. For Stoics, silence was not a temporary practice but a lifelong discipline. The benefits of silence compound over time. It shapes your character and strengthens your ability to live with clarity and purpose. The more you practice silence, the more it becomes an instinct and the more natural it feels, until it becomes a constant in how you experience life. In order to make silence a permanent part of your experience, establish regular rituals that reinforce it in both structured and unstructured parts of your day. Establish protected times in your daily schedule, over which the sole intention is deep thinking, reflecting, and quiet observation. And consider these protected times to be non-negotiable appointments with yourself. Reduce the noise in your physical environment to minimize distractions from making poor choices and avoid constant noise, which tires your mind if your environment includes constant chatter and noise or superfluous information. Notice, become patient, and train yourself to listen more than you speak when you first begin to develop silence. This applies to conversations, and in your approach to conversations, it's more important that you train yourself to listen. So interpersonally, it is helpful to listen and be aware of body language, breath changes, and other keen observations before responding to conversations. Before making important choices after big experiences, and at natural pauses during the day, take some brief moments of stillness to reset your mental clarity. Over time, the impact of this practice will grow exponentially throughout your whole life. You will make more intentional choices as they will be based on clarity, not impulsivity. Your relationships will be based on trust within a context of consistent and attentive listening. Your mind will respond more resiliently under pressure as you develop your ability to be calmer with less input noise from the outside world. Silence will incorporate naturally into your day-to-day routine through work, relationships, and your own process of development. You will no longer be seeking silence as a reaction to stressful situations. It will be the solid foundation and internal anchoring for all your choices, habits, and interactions, and it adds grounding in relaxed and intense situations alike.